Katelyn Burkholder, Teely Show.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Carrie Croft Show.
Thank you so much for having us.
I mean, my cup runneth over here.
We are very excited.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Tracy's been dropping some stealthy, little breadcrumbs, little digital breadcrumbs.
She's good at that. And
Yeah,
she's kind of like secret paparazzi.
Yeah, I know. I know. So we should probably let Tracy just tee this up and just kind of let it out of the bag in terms of what you guys have been doing. Just make it quick. Just like a little, Reader's Digest version of what's happening here.
Have I ever done anything quick?
No.
Ask Mark.
With his broken arm.
Poor guy. So, my best friend, Kaitlin, kitty cat, was diagnosed with cancer. And this woman is not only amazing, incredible, super important, but very, very private. And that's her defense mechanism. A lot of people don't know that about her, how private she is. And she'll put on the biggest smile in the world. And no one knows what's going on behind closed doors. And when this all happened, I was really encouraging her to share the hardships, share her entire story. Because I knew that other people could really feel a sense of like normalcy, inspiration from her story. And I knew it would allow her some freedom to knock walls down and to kind of take her shoulders in a big sigh of relief, like, okay, well, now everybody knows. She's been struggling with this infertility, and now she's struggling with a cancer. And she is an absolute pillar in the Grandview community. She was a teacher at New Albany. She's a teacher in Grandview. She's not just like, oh, yeah, that was my kid's teacher. People are wildly obsessed with her because she goes above and beyond for everybody.
Now she's starting to lie.
You're the teacher.
She's the teacher. Everybody,
but
she doesn't even know it. She's like, still sitting here today, she doesn't even know it. And
it's
so this allowing her finally to get her story out has been like the biggest blessing and honor. And I still cannot, like, pinch me, I'm dreaming. I still can't believe that she's finally talking about this.
So, Kaitlin, how do you feel? Because it's one thing to be a spectator, and it's another thing to be the person going through this. So how do you feel with this raw, vulnerable, real situation taking place in front of other people, some that you know, some that you don't? Like, what's it feel like inside? Like, why did you choose to say yes?
So I think first and foremost, I've always am very authentic. And so I think usually I'm the one that wants to be showing up for my friends and taking care of my friends and supporting people. And so to be on the other side and wanting to, I think, Trey really helped me to kind of get out of my comfort zone of saying like, this is okay. And when I realized with going through teaching last year that I needed to be honest with parents and tell parents what I was going through because their kids are little. I want them to know why I'm not at school. This is obviously, I'm not choosing to be away from your 6 and 7-year-old. So I think the more I was going through that last year of realizing I'm going to need to be sharing this with people, little by little, it became more freeing. And then I also realized through some of the emergency fertility things before, I just had to share it with people because it was so chaotic and busy. And I wanted my friends and my family and people that I love, because I would want my friends to come and open that with me and be honest with me and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm struggling with. This is the real life shit I'm going through. Yeah. I've never been a person trying to make it look pretty on the outside. I've also never been a person that puts a lot on social media or even the really great stuff. So I think it was, thinking of putting the worst of the worst out there, right? Of like, this is the real shit that we're dealing with. Behind closed doors, it's not pretty. It's actually, some of it's really ugly and terrifying. But Tracy has been a huge part of this, of that being free and open, and my parents and my husband and everyone supporting me, being like, hey, if, as cliche as it sounds, if one person sees it, or I can talk to one person at Spielman or a parent at school, and they're like, oh shit, I went through this, and I have had a couple parents reach out, and I'm like, okay, then that's worth it. Mm-hmm. But there have been moments I'm like, I don't think this is right. Like, I'm just trying to get through the day sometimes. So, but I think little by little, I'm like, who the fuck cares?
Well, and I may be the one to cry first. Maybe. I'm like, Carrie, you can't be the one to cry first. But so Tracy shared with me the TikTok yesterday. So I knew something was happening, but I didn't get to sit with it until last night when I was kind of alone and like watching it. And I was just I watched every single one by one, and went through it. And I had all these different waves of emotion, because I'm like, okay, Tracy's a spectator in this, and she's also going through, like how you said, two people fighting one cancer, like that struck me. And I went through a lot of waves of emotions, and then when I was done, what came out of it was like, bravo. Because here's the thing about it. Awesome. When you're going through something and I have no idea what it feels like to have a doctor say you have cancer. Like, I fear it. We all fear it. But then everybody kind of, they have cancer. And now we have to be very serious and dark. And okay, you are a human being who is a fucking awesome human being who wants to live life, right? So like, you have to weave the joy through the pain. And that's what you're doing. And I think it's just like,
thank you.
I just hope that other people can see this, and whether they have someone they know who's going through it, or maybe in the future, unfortunately, that they can take this approach to say, this is horrible. We never want anything bad to happen to us, but how are we going to weave in the joy? Because these things, the light and the dark, they work together as hard as we try to maybe make it different. So, I mean, seriously, like
thank you.
I just think it's so amazing.
We can look back on it and we laugh, we cry, we have it all. And that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
She said it. She never wanted to start this, and there was a lot of back and forth. And now we love it so much. We're documenting everything.
Which is so fun to go. Fun. I don't even know if that's the right word.
But think about that, what you just said. Like, it's so fun. Like, you guys are in the right, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Well, I did the night I got the actual diagnosis. I was like, screw this. We're not going to sit around home and cry. So we opened a bottle of champagne. We cheersed the bad titty. And we went out for a steak dinner. Yeah. And I was like, we're going to figure out how to like remember this night and not, there's so many ways. And as Tracy said, that's not all the time. There are those moments you cry and the moments you laugh about it. But I just think there's so many times when you have to. And if not, you're going to be laying on the floor the whole time. And it keeps turning and going back. And I'm like, well, cackling is the best way sometimes to.
Yeah. And I don't think, make no mistake, if someone at home is thinking, they're trying to gloss over this, diagnosis with making everything rainbows and unicorns. That's not what this is. This is facing something that you have no control over and trying to get through it the best way you can. So let's take a step back and talk through your story. And the first thing I think about when I think about what you've gone through since, we're going to start with 2012, is, the quote that like, life is what happens when you're busy making plans, and you hear that when you're younger and you're like, whatever, I'm going to go to this college. And then when I'm like this age, I'm going to get married. And then because we can have 2.4 kids and then we're going to, we all calculate what's going to happen. And life is what happens when you're busy making plans, right? So in 2012, the hardship that came to you was in the terms of fertility, or
Yes.
you had an ectopic
Yes.
pregnancy. Okay, so let's start there.
Sure. So as you said, that's exactly, what I thought. Oh, we've got this great plan. We got married. Makes me laugh now thinking we're going to wait a year. We're just going to be married. We're going to have fun. Not think, when the second I go off birth control, I'm sure we'll get pregnant. Clearly that doesn't happen. So it's probably a year later. We actually, funny, I've taken all the pregnancy tests before. It's been negative, 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 negative. And we were out at a dinner, and I remember telling Eric, like, oh, something just feels, I had this pain. I'm like, something feels weird. And I remember exactly where we were. We were at this farm to table dinner. And I'm like, oh, it's probably, cramps or whatever. So I pop ibuprofen. I go home and I come out of our bedroom and I'm laughing. And I pull my shirt up and I tell him, I'm like, I look pregnant. But obviously after all this time we've been trying, I've had a regular cycle again that month, like this, I didn't think anything of it. I go to my doctor the next day for a regular checkup. Don't mention anything to her because it's nothing. We're not pregnant. And she said, you always still should just have a pregnancy test around. You can still have a cycle, these things. And so I was leaving to go run errands and I'm like, well, I guess maybe I'll just take one because I'm having all this pain. I wasn't watching the clock. You know how when you first start, you're like, 3 minutes or whatever. And, you're all around. You're waiting for this moment. I was like, screw that. Screw that. I'm like, this is nothing. And I remember running back into the bathroom right before I leave. And I'm like, oh, holy shit. Like, and I call Eric and he's on service. And I'm like, do you have a second? He goes, no, I'm seeing a patient. I said, well, you do because I'm pregnant. And he's like, what? I'm like, there's no way. I've had a cycle and all these things. And I start telling him all these other symptoms that I'm having. And he's like, there's two things that are happening, or two possibilities.
He's a doctor.
And he's like, you're, miscarrying or, there's something really wrong. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's no big deal. Still not leading on to everything that I'm actually having, which is kind of my MO. She can tell you, he just got on me yesterday for things. And so fast forward a day or two later, and he's like, we're going to the emergency room. Like I didn't know how bad this was, that you were having blood and all these other things. And within probably 2 hours of being there, they did the ultrasounds. And I remember everyone in the room stopped talking. And I look up at him because I'm like, he's watching too. So if he stops talking, like I still think this is no big deal. And he stops talking. And no one's saying anything. Then I'm like, oh, all of a sudden that realization of this is much worse than I probably anticipate. And they had determined I had an ectopic and I was hemorrhaging. And so within, my parents didn't know, no one knew because we had just found out. And I'm like, there's no way that this is all happening this fast. Like I haven't even had the moment to soak it in. And now I'm laying in a bed and you're telling me you're rushing me to emergency surgery. So we called my parents and said, this is what's, by the way, we're pregnant. My mom was like working in the garden or something, So she's like, just have them wait until we get there. And they're 45 minutes away. And they're like, we can't wait. So they rushed me to surgery. They determined they didn't have to, that it had ruptured, but they didn't have to take the fallopian tube. And then after that, I feel like that's where it all started. It just hasn't gotten any easier. And it's made me take I took a long pause after that, I think 3 or 4 years, because I just felt like if I did that again, what happens next time? Is it worse next time? I always thought I'd be a mom. I never dreamed of not being a mom. I have the best mom ever. And so thinking, oh, what's wrong with my body that it's not, this isn't easy. And then when it did, it was awful. So does it get worse after this, or is the disappointment going to be there that I just can't do this?
So you take a couple years off. And then what was the next thing?
So the next thing, when I finally felt again ready to pursue it, was we met with an infertility specialist. And, we shared all of this with him, and he said, most likely your safest option would be IVF. He's like, IUI is a possibility, but with your history, it would most, just be safest for your body. So we start going down that path, and he said, what I want to do first with you is a surgery. They determined that I had polyps. And even that doesn't go as planned. So I get into surgery, and then they discover I have endometriosis, which, a lot of people do, can go on from there. And so I get off. First, they gave me medication, to heal. Then they give you more medication after the surgery to start having a cycle again. And then they call me and they say, okay, come in here on day 1, 3, 5, whatever it is, 10. And I remember getting off the phone and just looking at Eric and being like, I can't keep putting more medication in my body right now because you're so hopped up on hormones. And again, it just felt like, what's wrong with my body that it just doesn't work this way? Like everything seemed way harder than it had to be. And why can't we just get pregnant and hold a pregnancy and all of these things, And at this point too, I didn't have anybody around me that was talking about it. Everyone around me I was throwing a baby shower every other week. It felt like, so you're so happy for all of those people, but you're wondering, what is it in me that's not working? And so 2016, we did that. And then things just I never went through with all of it.
So you didn't complete a cycle?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No. And I can't exactly tell you what was in my head that didn't ever let me do that. Because I am a balls to the wall, I'm competitive, I will do anything type person. And I wouldn't say I'm scared of things but maybe somewhere in my head there's that, am I disappointing me, Eric, even though I know that's not true. We've had so many conversations where he's like, if you've changed your mind or, if you're worried about that, like, if that's okay. Like, if you decided, I know you've always wanted to have kids, and my parents they are the best grandparents. My brother has 3 kids. They get pregnant standing next to each other. I mean, like, literally.
Right.
So it's one of those things where you're like, damn. Like, and I know that's not at all how my parents would feel, but it hurts me that, like, you want to give them grandkids and all of these things, and I'm very hard on myself. So I guess I can't fully put into words the roadblocks that were stopping me, but I also think the biggest thing I thought is I had time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had time. And so I wasn't in a rush, and I wasn't in the place of trying to put on all the pressure. And little did I know, I didn't have that time. So I think that when we flip around to this year, it was just like, damn. Oh, thought I had time. I thought I was really healthy, but I didn't.
How did you end up getting diagnosed with breast cancer?
So I went in for my 40 screening, normal mammogram. So 5 years ago, I had found a lump. If you would have told me then, I would have had cancer. I'd have been like, obviously. But so I went to Spielman 5 years ago. They did the mammogram, and they said, you're very cystic. You have very dense tissue. No big deal. Okay, moving on. 5 years later, they recommended that I would get the mammogram and ABUS screening, which is the full ultrasound. And so I went for my screening. I wasn't in any rush. I turned 40 in October. Honestly, I wasn't at all concerned. So I go in March that morning, I was just supposed to have my mammogram because they couldn't schedule them. They were too busy to schedule them together. I was talking with a lady that does the A-bus. We were just chit-chatting, and she's like, I might be able to squeeze you in real fast over here. So I go back to work, and I get an alert. Hey, we want to see you back in. My my normal doc reaches out. We're all kind of saying, like, no big deal. It's probably just the dense tissue. I go to Spielman in the afternoon. Still, don't tell my parents. I don't even think I told Eric because I wasn't concerned. So I go bebopping in there. And I remember pulling into the parking lot thinking, oh man, it must be really awful to come here regularly for treatment. And like you see the people walking in and it's like, oh, that's awful. And so I go up, they do my mammogram, and my husband's niece actually works there, and she came down and sat with me. We're just chit-chatting, and she was really busy. And I remember the nurse looking at her and saying, well, are you staying with her? Or do you want us to let you know? And she goes, no, just if she needs me. And so she goes off. I go back, and they do an ultrasound. And I remember laying there thinking, how lucky am I that we've gotten to say yes to every test today. We don't have to, with insurance and everything else, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And they said, okay, we're going to go show these to the radiologist, make sure he doesn't need anything else. I bet not less than 2 minutes later, the radiologist walks in. And it was one of those moments where in your head, you're like, fuck. And he pulls his chair up right in front of me, and he sits down, and he said, Kaitlin, I'm very concerned. Okay. And he said, we're seeing this in your right side, this in your left side. We need to get a biopsy. Like, okay. And he kept reiterating, I'm very concerned. At that point, I'm like, just tell me I have cancer. Like, you know what it looks like. Like, there's something that you're seeing on this imaging that is not good. And so that night they had done my physical before they did 2 biopsies. And I think I went home that night knowing after those conversations that what the diagnosis would come back as that next week. And so that next week they called us, did further imaging, and then it went to, as I said, the lymph node. So then we did a biopsy on the lymph node, and everything just kept coming back. Positive, 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 positive. So
you always think, kind of like when you're pulling up in the parking lot, like, oh, that must, you always think about what that moment would feel like if someone tells you that you have, cancer. Were you in shock? Were you crying? Like, what was your demeanor when you figured, the first time he said, I'm really concerned, and you're like, oh shit?
I think I was so shocked and surprised because, again, I went bebopping in there thinking, I'm going to walk out and they're going to tell me it's another cyst and I have dense tissue. I think it took a couple days to set in. I don't think I cried for that was a Thursday. I went back to work, and then I think on Sunday, it all hit me, and I remember just sobbing in my room because I said, now we're waiting. It was the first of many times I realized how excruciating that wait is for people. The waiting of, even though I knew most likely they were going to come back and say this is cancerous, it was still sitting there waiting. And that was the first of, I don't know how many times that we sat and waited for terrible news. It's always kind of in my mind before cancer and after. And I think I have so much more compassion for so many people in their lives change on one day in way harder ways than ours ever did. But just understanding that, what I thought our year was going to look like to having no idea and no control, and also not knowing how much worse it was going to get. But also all the, as many times as I've said things have gone horribly wrong, there's been so much that's gone really right. And I try in those moments look for the right stuff, and I wouldn't have survived any of this without friends and family and the amazing support we've gotten.
Yeah.
And those people pick you up when I want to sit in the house. And as social as I am, like, you just don't feel like doing all of those things, and you don't have it in you to do. So
Yep.
I think I've had those hard days, and it took a while to settle in. And I think some point I'll look back on this and I'll still be settling into trying to process it. But yeah, it sucked. To say the least. So the diagnosis was in March. And funny enough, it was around Christmas last year. So about a year ago that I looked at Eric, and I think he in some way had just decided in his own head, like, I guess, this isn't our path. I hadn't really been gung-ho about it for a while. We hadn't, we always had talked about it, and he would be a fantastic dad. But I told him last year, I was like, I'm ready. Like, let's give it a go. We're going to do it. And in my head, I was telling Trey today, there was nothing in me that thought. I was like, we're going to go full force. We're going to do IVF, and it's going to be great. We are going to have a baby this year. That's what I thought this year was going to be. I thought I'd be pregnant, maybe have a baby by now. And so thankfully, though, we had gone back to our infertility specialist in January, started the conversations with him again. They had done, a lot of workup and tests and all the things. And it makes me laugh now looking back, because my biggest concern was, and I remember riding home in the car and looking at Eric thinking, dang, I have to get surgery again. And because they were like, we're going to take out the polyps again. We're going to, make it the best space and I was almost teary at that. And now that is hilarious to me. Like, I had no idea if that was just going to be it, how,
Give me the surgery.
Yeah.
Give it to me.
Who's your fertility doctor?
Dr. Nash.
Okay.
And they have been amazing. And thankfully, we had set all of that up again, because I was diagnosed on a Wednesday, and they had us we texted with they call it nurse navigator on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. She had us on a call with him by Friday, and they actually started me on an emergency cycle on a Friday. They said, how fast can you be here?
Okay, I will never forget this Friday, because we're sitting around her island. Mm-hmm. Ash was in town.
Yes, my childhood best friend had flown in from Atlanta just on a whim.
Yeah, had nothing to do with that. And we're all sitting around crying at the island, thinking about what is happening. And then Eric is having to go to all these pharmacies. And we're like, what is happening? And now you have to start all of these shots to do egg retrieval.
They were shipping meds in, because normally you'd have lead time, right?
Well, so now, just to make sure, so you had to have an emergency cycle, because they had to get this done as fast as possible to get the eggs out, to freeze them so that you could start your treatment.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So, and they knew they would most likely have to shut down my ovaries. So they consider it kind of like hibernation. I'm on a Zoladex. So basically I'm in menopause now. Lucky me. So now, not to mention, I have
Put it on my
hot flashes and all kinds of things. But yes, they were shipping in meds from like Seattle. Eric's calling while we're sitting in, all within a week of finding out I'm diagnosed. We don't have much time. This will be our one and only shot. So thinking we'll do multiple rounds, and it'll be fine. And we'll, of course I'm 40, so they won't retrieve as many eggs, but no problem. We'll get plenty. And then to boom, you've got one shot talk about pressure.
Right.
Right. So among like just going through the trauma of the diagnosis, but at that point I felt like I just didn't have time to think. There was no, what should we do? It was, this is what I want to do. I think that discussion was had because, I didn't have to go through it, but I thought, am I going to look back and always say then, what if? And at least if nothing comes from this, I know that I tried. And I'll probably beat myself up for the rest of my life that I didn't do things sooner. But I'm trying every day to give myself more grace of, it's at this point, it's not going to do any good. I can't go back and do all the what ifs and if I would have done it in 2012, if I would have done it in 2016 or anywhere in between there, where could we be now? But,
God, we beat ourselves up, don't we? The what if game.
Yeah.
Truly.
Shoulda.
Yeah.
So what happened with your cycle?
So we did, we went up and got, during my egg retrieval, they retrieved 6 eggs. So we were kind of laughing about this earlier today, where I feel like through the cancer diagnosis, I kept surprising everyone in the worst way, where I was on the losing end of all the percentages, like the 0.1 or the 1% of. So I'm like, well, this is going to suck, right? Like I've been on every losing percentage so far. And this, funny enough, I didn't get an A+. Let's say that.
You'll take a B- at this
I
point.
like to be an overachiever. This was not an A+. But they retrieved 6 eggs. I think 4 matured, 3 fertilized, and then you have to wait the 5 to 6 days. And I'm like, mind you, this is all just getting sent to me over a computer. And I'm like, the biggest thing in you're texting me basically, like what the actual? So we get that 3 have fertilized and we wait the 5 to 6 days. And I'm like, the percentage was nothing. I mean, at this point, I think it's like less than 50% on all that. Well, Eric was out of town on a business trip, and I remember opening up my chart, and it's like there's the little red dot that you have a message. And I'm like, this is so fucked up that I'm just reading this. So one actually turned into an embryo. We had all the tests done. So we have one little boy frozen up in Akron.
We talk about him all the time. We're like, well, my baby boy's here.
Yeah.
Baby boy. And we're so excited for baby boy.
So I know, it's like
the adrenaline I
Oh my
feel.
God.
Of
Yeah.
course, there's one.
one.
Like it's
Yes.
like this is high stakes.
right?
No.
Right? And I was like, this body clearly hasn't been a good home. So, like, that's a whole nother.
Oh, we can find you a home. Don't worry.
Well, that's.
I told her. I
Yeah,
go,
don't you worry about
this
that.
is the
Don't
one.
Don't you worry about things.
So many extra connections.
I mean, it's crazy, right? Like, that's what then you can't. You don't even get to processing that yet. Of, like, I'll never carry a baby. And there's so many, and you're like, in one where everything rides on one embryo, which I feel super blessed about. Don't get me wrong. But it's crazy. It's just not at all where you think you'd be.
No, it's wild.
Yeah.
So so positive news. We've got one healthy baby boy in the freezer. Okay. So there's work to be done here in the meantime, right? To get you where you need to be. So let's talk about where you're at right now with your health and like what does all that look like?
Honestly, right now it's still day by day. I mean, I think overall prognosis is great. So I was diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer. I've done to date now 12 rounds of Taxol. So I did weekly Taxol in a clinical study. And then I went to surgery. Shocker. didn't go as planned. Not at all. So surgery, you obviously hope for the best. I was so positive. My doctor or my surgeons were laughing because I was cackling down the hall. Like I was ready to go. They walk in the room and they're like, okay, we're not ready for you yet. I'm like, well, I'm ready. Like, let's go. Let's get this shit done.
Let's fucking go.
Yes. Yeah. LFG.
Yeah.
I did a lumpectomy. I think there's just been a lot of twists and turns with, they knew I had a positive lymph node. I had imaging on a Monday. They had shown from the Taxol that I had 50% tumor response. So we went in super hopeful that my tumor was shrinking. My lymph node, they didn't see any other abnormal lymph nodes. And then unfortunately during surgery, what was supposed to be 3 to 4 hours turned into, I think I woke up about 7.5 hours later. And when they got in, they saw that I had what they considered abnormal lymph node. So when they sent it, they found another positive, which then they automatically take out all the lymph nodes on that side. So at that point, still, we didn't know if it was 2 or it was 10 or it was 15. So thankfully, I have the most amazing surgeons and doctors ever, and they were able to do a lymph bypass. So my plastic surgeon was able to reconnect those lymph veins. But I knew when I woke up, I was like, something is not right. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, nobody else is here back in this room except for 2 nurses. And so I asked them when I woke up, and I was like, I could tell my arm was something. And I'm like, they take my lymph nodes? They're like, yep. So when we got the pathology back, there was still residual cancer. And they found 10 of my 26 lymph nodes were positive. So apparently even my oncologist was going, what the fuck? It was just gut punch, to say the least. But so it caused me to have a round of AC, which they consider the red devil, which completely wiped me out. Awful.
Why do they call it the red devil?
It's just the worst of the worst.
And it's red.
It is red, yes. And they actually push it. So I have a port. The nurses actually gown up. I guess if it gets on your skin, it can kill the skin. But thankfully with it going into my port. But I always laugh. I'm like, so it can kill your skin, yet you're injecting it into my body.
Talk about the trust. It's incredible. Just the trust that you're forced to have. You're like, okay, let's let it rip.
Yeah, sure. Oh. Put that right into my body.
Did you feel it right away? Was it something that you felt right away, or did it?
No, usually it take a while. I think it's hard to differentiate at that point for me too, how the fatigue, and when people say the fatigue during treatment, I had no idea what that would feel like, especially being so active to then just, you see it when I walk up the stairs and I'm like, I used to be on the stair mill for 30, 45 minutes and then work out with a trainer. I'm like, now I can't walk my stairs. But yeah, thankfully the meds are great in terms of nausea meds. And I mean, they load you up with so many meds before you even leave. They put them in your IV. You take another nausea med for 4 nights. It just was terrible.
Yeah.
It was pretty terrible.
So your doctors are saying that your prognosis is good, that they are confident that they're going to get all this. You're going to be on the road to recovery and back worrying about your fertility journey.
We hope so.
ASAP.
Yes, we hope so. So I still have another about 5 or 6 months of treatment. Even though I finished AC, they threw in, we kind of got another wrench in it that we knew every 3 weeks I'd still get 2 targeted therapies, which, everyone's like, oh, those are no big deal. And then you're like, oh, okay.
Until it's you.
Yeah.
And
Because
then
it's
it's
not
like,
your
I'll no
body.
big deal your ass.
Yes.
Exactly.
And it like caught me off guard last week, right? And they're like, oh,
That's
we're
our
gonna,
next sweatshirt,
we're going to
NBD.
reload you. And I was like, what the hell is a reload? Like, why are we reloading? And they're like, well, it's been so long since you've had these 2 meds. I'm like, oh, great. So I'm going to feel like shit and they're not as bad, but they do a whole other things with your body that make you not feel great. So yes, prognosis is great. But I still have it'll be about 6 months of treatment. And at this point now, I don't really take any of it for granted in terms of, definitely not for granted, but in terms of what's next. Like, we thought we knew the plan. And every time we keep going, oh, wait, just kidding.
Right.
Actually, we got to do this because you surprised us. And I'm like, can I not surprise you anymore?
I'd like to surprise you in a really positive way next time.
I would like to be not extraordinary.
No, I always say, on the...
She wins everything. And I'm like, stop. Can you be last place here? That'd be great. Stop winning.
Yes, on all the reports it says that you don't want to be remarkable. Like,
right.
if you
don't want to be an outlier.
No,
in this
and
situation.
anytime they say like unremarkable on one of your reports, you're like, yes.
Yes.
Like, I've never wanted to be more unremarkable in my whole entire life.
I'm part of the masses, right?
Yes.
So this leads me to a little side alley here. I want to talk about your relationship a little bit and what this has, brought to light. And what I always, in my infinite, old wisdom, the one thing that I always think about when you get married, how dumb are we, right? And so naive, but it's so beautiful though.
Yeah.
Like, you need to have that. And it's all about this, I'll never forget my wedding was just this incredible winter wedding and the Monique Louier gown, and we were whisked off to Hawaii, and like it was just this
Sign me up.
right, unbelievable thing. And in my mind, and I'm so happy that I had that. But the thing I would tell someone who's getting married, and I feel like we should do this more often, not to ruin anyone's joy, but just to be realistic. It's like, yes, think about him looking at you down the aisle crying. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I want you to think about, you're in the barracks together. You got your helmets on and your machine guns, and you've got shit coming at you. Is that the person you want next to you?
Yeah.
Covering your back, because
That's
life,
so well said.
That's always what I think about, the things that we have gone through, and so many people have gone through. It's like, how are you going to show up, in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. You hear all these things, and you're like, yeah. But when good times or in bad, when sickness and health step at your door, how are you showing up?
Yep.
So how has Eric showed up for you? And you know what? It doesn't have to be that he's been perfect. What have you seen in terms of how this impacts a relationship?
I think that has been what's, honestly, all of my relationships, that's what's gotten me through, right? Whether it's most definitely Eric first, of just him being there. And it's not perfect, right? And like, it is true when you say that it affects everyone. It's not just affecting me. I think that's what was harder for me than I tell my parents and Eric. I'm like, I'm glad it's me having it versus any of you guys, because I know I can keep fine up here and I have you guys as support. And they have all shown up. It's friends, it's family, everyone, where it's been hard. It's, I'm watching him struggle with it because he can't fix it. And he wants to fix it, and he wants me to be fine. And I've told him so many times, you can't fix it. Like, I know he knows that, but that's also his job, right? It's the problem solving. And so I think for him to watch me go through it and struggle and day by day not know what to expect has been really hard. But I think, there's overall, I think it's made us so much stronger, because this is the real shit we got to figure out, right? It's not the roses and butterflies and he's older than me and we laugh, like, then he's taking care of me, and no hair and all of these things. And puking over the toilet, the amount of times during, he found me on the bathroom floor, like just him constantly showing up and what can I do? How can I help? Like constantly being that support of whatever I needed or however I needed him to be. But yeah, it's not all perfect. I've seen it really affect him. And there are times that I get angry and frustrated, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning of, it's not all the laughing and there are sometimes I'm just mad. Mm-hmm. And there have been times that I'm just so tired and don't feel good. And I've told him, I've had to go back to him and say, I'm sorry. Like, of course he's getting the brunt of that, right? Like who's in your house that gets the brunt of you just being like, it's nothing he's doing. You just get mad because you're mad at life.
And you're scared. I mean, this is, there's nothing bigger, to go through. And you probably get fucking tired of being vulnerable and tired of being the one that has your head over the toilet and tired of not being able to, because you're like, you might feel guilty and you might feel all these things that you're as a human being feeling like, I just want to feel better.
You just want to feel, I said, quote, normal, whatever that was.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what that is anymore. And I took it for granted every morning. But yeah, you do. You feel guilty and it's out of your control. But I mean, I know I'm not the most fun person to be around all the time.
Well, neither is Tracy. So you guys, that's perfect.
No. Edit that out.
You know what? Where you're like, oh my gosh, like
whatever. We sit on the couch all the time, and we are.
I know.
So fun.
But I think it's really weird, like the vulnerability of being in that position of. Again, I like being the person to take care of my friends and my family. And I think that's been a huge lesson for me during this of like, but it does get tiring too. You're like, I just want to feel like myself again and like go back to doing those things and helping other people instead of feeling like I am not a burden, but in a way and no one has made me feel that way. Eric doesn't, but it's, what do you need? How can I help you? I'm like, how can I help you?
Yeah.
Like, dang it. Like,
well, speaking of, that's a great segue. So I'm a big believer in visualizing, right? So we've talked about where we're at and we're in the thick of it with a really great trajectory to get in a really good spot again. So let's visualize once all this, treatment is over and your body, heals and you're good. And now it's time to focus back on that little MB, right?
Yeah. We're going to name him MB. Ooh,
so speaking of helping people, there are so many potential surrogates out there, right? And not even to say that that's something you're sold on right now, but I am a huge believer in planting seeds in the uni. The universe,
love that. You
throw it out and so it goes through the spin cycle, the wash, rinse, and spin, and it manifests in all kinds of ways. And nobody will ever convince me otherwise. So I think we just talk a little bit about what that would look like, right? So you'd be open to a surrogate.
Absolutely.
And that would be like what? Probably like 12 months from now, maybe? Not even quite 12 months from now?
So I think yes. Okay. I mean, I also think what's so interesting is when we started this journey, and I think haven't fully processed that whole side of it quite yet. But I remember telling my doctor and my nurse at our clinic that, let's talk about it this past summer. I, somewhere in my head, naively thought I would feel good enough. I wouldn't have to focus as much on myself. We're going to get we'll start going down that path. And now I'm like, I was just trying to live through the day.
Right.
So I think I'm open for it when it comes, yet I still haven't had time to process all of that yet. And I don't know when that will be. But again, I don't want it to be that I think I have forever time again.
Well, this is the thing about getting a surrogate. There's a long tail here. Like it's not something that you're like, hello, and then the next day, right?
Here's my embryo.
So that's why I think putting it out And let's
Yeah.
say that there is a 12-month
Yeah.
or an 8-month, because a lot of times people need to sit with that for a while. So somebody might hear this and be like, hey, oh my gosh, my sister's roommate is a perfect candidate, but she has to finish school. I mean, there's logistics that people, right? And there is an option for me to carry it for you. So I'm actually seriously considering that.
Love it.
Can you imagine?
Trace,
Let's just add let's add a dumpster fire just to this whole thing.
I was like,
Trace is actually volunteered.
Wait, are you going to do it? You should do
wait,
it.
nobody knows
I think you should do it.
that I volunteered to carry your baby.
Well, but
Wait.
Mark put the kibosh on that.
I know, but like nobody knows. They're
Actually,
like,
this is what Tracy was,
Mark would do it.
teasing all
Mark.
through Instagram today, is that she's really already carrying my baby.
yep, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. If I was, I would be in the hospital. We all know it.
Yeah.
The stakes are like, all jokes aside, to be honest, like the stakes are so high for MB, baby MB.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're too tied together.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have like jumped in and they are like, I would love to carry this baby for you, like really close, good friends, family.
Yeah.
Too close to the source
Mm-hmm.
to be able to say, because if anything would happen inside of my body to hurt that embryo,
Mm-hmm.
that would be very hard to separate out of the love that we have for each other. That would be,
I
it's too
have no
close.
doubt that we
Too
will
close.
find the
Perf.
perfecto
Perf
surrogate.
surg.
So
Perf
listen,
surg.
if you're out there and you're hearing this, okay, like we're just putting out a little seed and letting it swirl around into the
I
universe.
love it.
So if you know someone who is altruistic, who loves to serve others, who loves being pregnant, has a really solid, healthy pregnancy history, who may want a little extra cash,
Right.
who hopefully lives somewhere around here, but we won't cut you out if you're a little bit farther away. You can still be a contestant, but we may not. Listen. I know you're private, and I know this is not easy for you. So I'm beyond honored and grateful to be sitting with you and hearing your story. And I look forward to seeing you and Tracy sort of continue to bob and weave your way through this, whatever the day brings. If the day is sad, it's sad. If the day is a dance, it's a dance. But doing life and figuring out how to move through this. And I know that so many other people probably feel the same way out there. They want to watch and root you on as you continue to fucking kick cancer's ass.
Yeah.
Damn it. Any other last words before we close up?
Yeah.
Don't want to,
Yeah. I want to talk about our TikTok
Yeah, okay. Bring it on.
because this is the big
reveal.
Oh,
reveal.
man.
Okay.
Because of how private she is. And because when she cracks privately behind closed doors, puts herself together, and then she comes back beaming. And I said, I want to show these moments in between, the highs, the lows, the everything. And I know her. And I said, the world needs to know you. And I felt like there would be such a freedom in allowing her to share her own story and to have a voice. She didn't want to do it. And finally, she said, if I could help one person, I will put it out there. And in that moment, I started a TikTok. And the first post was on August 16th. And it took off from there with no one knowing. And a couple weeks later, I got a message from a mom. And she said, my 6-year-old daughter just went through the same chemo that she was going through. And I showed her your video. And she said it was incredible for her to see someone that looked just like you. And she said her daughter goes, I bet she has a port just like me. And she's like, we are rooting for you. This mom, with a 6-year-old daughter. And I thought that is incredible. And I'll never forget telling her and her mom that, hey, look, your message is so impactful. I don't even think you realize it. Just how positive she is. And the other thing, the other layer to this, and I know I alluded to it earlier, but she is this protected gem in Grandview. Like everybody is like requesting her for a teacher, and where is she at? And like, they're not just like, oh yeah, Mrs. Burkholder or whatever. I mean, I get mauled constantly because
you're kind of biased though.
Nope, you're ridiculous. See, she doesn't even know, like, know your worth, girl, know your worth. I mean, these moms, they're like, where's Mrs. Burkholder? And when is she coming back? Blah, blah, blah. I think this is going to help selfishly alleviate all the text messages.
Okay, let's get to the
real thing. Can I just answer
TikToks.
all of your questions? But again, nobody knows about it. So I just want, her to have her story out there. I think we can look back at it in 5, 10, 15, hopefully 100 years when we're still alive, to look back at this journey, the goods, the bads, the uglies, and really know that you made such an impact. Your story is incredible.
I don't know about that.
You are incredible.
Thank you.
And just to be able to share that finally, I think is a big sigh of relief. There's some freedom in being able to say, this is my story. This is who I am. This is what's going on.
And I obviously never would have done any of this without her. Like, she just has pushed me out of my comfort zone a little bit to open all of that up. And I told her from the beginning, I started capturing a lot of starting from the emergency IVF cycle and taking all these pictures and videos, and which is so unlike me, number one, obviously. And I'm like, I don't know why. I knew I wanted to look back at some point. And so it's been one of the greatest gifts ever that someone could do for you. And not to mention just allowed us to have fun and do it something together, where I think when you're sitting in the hospital and you're going through all the crap, where we're making a funny video or a serious video or whatever it might be, but I'll be forever grateful to her that she is a ride or die alongside of me through this dumpster fire. The things, again, we didn't think. It's kind of like a relationship, right? Where you're back in college laying in our dorm room beds, never thinking 20-some years later you're going to be sitting next to each other in a hospital bed going through something. So
yeah,
thank you to both of you for making it easy to sit here and talk and share the shitstorm.
I mean, your story will impact so many people. It really will. And
thank you.
I look forward to you seeing the fruit of that, because it really does make a situation like this. You're like, okay, there are gifts that come out of this crazy stuff. And that's what's going to happen here. It's probably, and with the little girl, it's already happening. All right. And with that, thank you, ladies, for sharing yourselves. I am beyond honored and humbled to be sitting with you, like I said. And if you're out there still following your girl, please follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And you know what? While we're on the topic, go get your mammogram, go get your colonoscopy, go get yourself checked. Anything that you have out there available to you that is preventative in nature, if you're not doing it, you're dumb. Go get checked.
Amen.
Second public announcement, if you're out there and you've thought about being a surrogate, or if you have a brothers, cousins, sisters, aunts, bus drivers, butchers, bakers, mama, whoever's out there in the universe, we would love to talk to you, because this girl is there. She's going places, and she's going to need one.
Hey,
for
we're
this little
fun.
for this little boy.
We're so fun.
Yes, for this
Fun
little boy
and-
Envy. And until next time, keep moving.